Hello, this is lesson 2.2, adding rational numbers. So please make sure you have the right worksheet for 2.2. And remember, if you cannot or do not have your worksheet, you cannot find it, you can always print one out on my class website, the same place you found this video. And also please make sure you have two different colors before you continue. Okay, so in this section, we're going to talk about adding rational numbers. Now remember, rational numbers includes integers, decimals, and fractions. So the first thing we're going to look at is we're going to review integers because I know we did this in chapter 1, it's just been a while. So at the very top here, it has our first set of rules. So at the very top, you're going to fill in this word. It's going to say if the signs are the same, we add and use the same sign. And please make sure that you use red or a different color that pops up. We add and use the same sign. So a simple problem like this, 7 plus 6, we remember it's just regular adding, so it's 13, and we box our answer. And then when we have two negatives, a negative 8 plus negative 11, we just add those two and keep the sign, so then our answer is negative 19. Okay, now let's look at the second set of rules. Here it says, if the signs are different, subtract and take the sign of the greatest absolute value. So again, let's review. We have 8 plus negative 17. They're different signs, so we subtract them, and the difference is 9, and then we make it a negative because the bigger absolute value, negative 17, is negative. And now let's look at the second example. We have 9 plus negative 7. They're different signs, so we subtract, and we take the sign from the bigger absolute value, which is 9. That's positive, so our answer is positive 2. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at adding decimals. And at the very top, this is your top right now, it should say, if the signs are the same, we add and use the same sign. Okay, so it's the same rules as we had for adding integers, except we have decimals. So what I tell my students is always line up the dots. The dots are the decimal points. So make sure you write this in red next to these instructions. So for this problem here, 4.5 plus 6.3. We're going to write the decimals so that the dots line up. Okay, and then we're going to add straight down because they're both positive. So then we bring down the decimal, it goes straight down, and then the answer is going to be 10.8. So box your answer. And now let's take a look at the second problem. We have negative 1.8 plus negative 1.6. They have the same signs, okay, so the same signs we add. And we line up the dots, and then adding them, we're going to get 3.4, but they're negative decimals, so then we keep it negative. So write that down and box your answer. Now let's take a look at the rules when they're different signs. So I want you to add these words in the blank. It should say, if the signs are different, subtract and take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. So here, for these two, negative 2.5 plus 10.7, they're different signs. Okay, so different signs, we find the difference. So again, we have to line up the dots. You're going to put 10.7. Okay, let me make sure it stays blue. Okay, 10.7 minus 2.5, and then you subtract. Okay, and you're going to have to borrow, so 10 minus 2 is 8. So here we have 8.2, but the bigger absolute value is 10.7, so our answer is positive. Taking a look at the second problem, on the second problem we have a positive and a negative decimal, so there are different signs again. So then we're going to subtract, and we take put the bigger decimal on top, or the bigger absolute value on top, and then we have 8.2 on the bottom. Okay, subtract. Okay, and then our answer is 9.4. But here, our greater absolute value is negative, so then our answer is negative 9.4. So write your answer and box it. Okay, now we're moving to the third box of your notes where we're going to be adding like fractions. Okay, so fractions take a little bit more work, but it's still the same concepts with our negatives. So at the very top it says if the signs are the same, we add and use the same sign. So now let's look at these two fractions. They both have a negative and they both have the same denominators. Okay, so it's important when you're adding fractions that they have the same denominator. So what I always tell kids to do is just put it over 6 completely. And then your two numerators, since they're both negatives, the negative goes with the numerator. So we have negative 5 plus negative 5. Okay. And now we just add them. So here it's going to be negative 10 over 6. Now, in fractions, we always want to leave our answers in simplest form. So we're going to divide both of these by 2. And then our answer is going to be negative 5 over 3. And this is an improper fraction, but I am okay with you leaving it improper. You can leave it negative 5 over 3. Okay, now let's take a look at this next problem. On the next one, again, they're both negatives, but now this one is a mixed number, so we need to make it an improper fraction. Now to do that, you're going to ignore the negatives, just make the 1 3/4 improper, and if you remember this from last year, we times the 4 by 1 and then add 3. Okay, so 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. So now our improper fraction is 7/4. And because it's negative, I'll put a negative in front. Okay, and then we have negative 3/4. Okay, now they have a common denominator, so you put it all over 4. Okay, and on the top you have negative 3 plus negative 7. And that's going to be negative 10 over 4. And then we simplify. So we divide by 2 on the top and the bottom. And so now, in simplest form, it's going to be negative 5 over 2. And again, it's okay if you leave your answers as an improper fraction. Okay, for the bottom part here, you're going to write if the signs are different, you subtract and take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. Okay, but again, they have to have the same denominator. So here we're going to put it, since they both have 12, great, we put it all over 12. Okay, and now we have a positive 5, and the second fraction is negative, so that's a negative 7. And now we simplify the numerators, so it's negative 2 over 12, okay? And then both of these numbers are divisible by 2, okay? So now our simplest fraction, or our simplest form is negative 1 over 6, so it's negative 1/6, okay? And then for the last one, again, we have a mixed number. So we're going to make that, first we make that mixed number improper. Okay, so here we're going to do 3 times 1 plus 1. So that's going to be 4 over 3. So let's write that here. And let's bring down the negative 2/3. Okay, so they have a common denominator. So we put it all over 3. Our numerators are going to be negative 2 plus 4. And then you can add those. And negative 2 plus 4 is 2. You keep the denominator. Okay, and then that's your answer. Okay, now we're on the last box. The last box on the right is adding unlike fractions. So these take the most work, okay? So at the very top. So here you're going to have it say, find a common denominator, then follow the rules for adding fractions with like denominators. So before we can combine the numerators, these two denominators have to be the same. So I often tell kids, okay, take a look at the bigger denominator. Since 2 does not go into 5 evenly, we do multiples of 5 until 2 goes into it. So the next multiple of 5 is 10. So that's going to be our common denominator. So here we're going to write both of them as a fraction over 10. So this is going to be over 10, and this is going to be over 10. Now for the first fraction, to make the 2 a 10, okay, we have to multiply it by 5. So that'll make that a 10. So I want to do that in red. So I'm going to do times 5 times 5, okay? And so now my new numerator is going to be negative 5. And then for the second fraction, I want to make the second fraction a 10, so I times it by 2. So 5 times 2 is 10, so that's what you do with the numerator. You multiply it by 2, and you get 8. Okay, now they have the same denominators, so you can put 10 on the bottom, and then in the numerator, it's negative 5 plus 8, and then when you add them together, you get 3 over 10, and you box your answer in that simplest form. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Here, they don't have the same denominator, but if you look at the bigger denominator, 3 goes into 6 evenly. So that's our denominator, our common denominator. So we're going to have negative 1/6, that stays the same. But on the next fraction, if we make it a 6, it's not a 6 here, so we do 3 times 2, that makes it a 6. And then 2 times 2, you have to multiply the top number by the same. So 2 times 2 is going to be 4, okay? And now we can combine the two numerators over the same denominator. We have negative 1 plus 4, and that equals 3. It's going to be 3 over 6. Okay, and now we can reduce it by dividing both of those by 2. Okay, I'm going to squeeze that in. I know I'm outside the margin. And so now our simplest form is going to be 1/2. Oops, I don't divide by 2. I divide by 3. Sorry about that. Okay, 1/2 is our answer. Okay, for the last one here, for the third one that's not numbered, we have a mixed number again. So remember, we have to make that an improper fraction. So we're going to do 3 times 1 plus 2, and that's going to be 5 over 3. Okay, so now we make it negative, and now we have 3 over 12. Okay, so we're going to find a common denominator, and if you notice in our denominator, 12 is bigger and 3 goes into 12. So that is our common denominator. We have 12 here, and then we're going to put a 12 on the second fraction. So for the first fraction, since it's already 12, we're going to leave the numerator alone. It's going to be the same. We're just going to bring it over. But for the second fraction, since it wasn't a 12, it was a 3, we have to figure out, okay, how do we make it a 12? Well, we times it by 4. And so you do that to the top. Oops, I don't know why I'm switching colors, sorry. That's going to be negative 20. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20. Now we can put it over the denominator. Okay, so we have 3 plus negative 20. Okay. And then that's going to be negative 17. And we keep the denominator 12. And that's simplest form, negative 17 over 12. And that's all for your notes. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.